Welcome to the OOV Daily Reflection for Tuesday, June 30th. Today's Gospel passage from the 8th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew has us reflecting on Jesus' calming of the storm on the Sea of Galilee. The passage reads as follows. As Jesus got into a boat, his disciples followed him. Suddenly a violent storm came up on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by waves, but he was asleep. They came and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." He said to them, "Why are you terrified, O you of little faith?" Then he got up, rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was great calm. The men were amazed and said, "What sort of man is this, whom even the winds and the sea obey?" I believe there's at least three different ways of viewing this experience of Jesus and his disciples on the Sea of Galilee. I think the first way of viewing it is from the perspective of Jesus. I think a second perspective is that of the disciples in relationship to the event. And then also I think we as neutral observers, people who are reading this passage, can view it. So I'm going to talk about each of these three different ways of viewing this situation, hopefully to provide some different insights for our prayer this day. So beginning with Jesus' perspective, he realized that the disciples needed him to calm the sea in order to ease their fears. We know that Jesus could have done other things to address this situation, but he chose to act in a decisive and clear way to ease the disciples' fear. Now, his words to the disciples are definitely one that challenged them for their lack of belief. But again, Jesus did address their request. He answered their prayer. Therefore, I believe we can be rest assured that God's grace can do similar things for us in our lives. But the challenge is always waiting for God's grace to come, waiting for God to act, and also being open to receiving God's grace in whatever form it may come. When we look at it from the perspective of the disciples, fear took over. And when we're operating out of fear, brothers and sisters, we're not operating at our best. The fight or flight mechanism kicks in our lives, and we just have to survive. We fight or we flee. But the disciples had at least enough clarity to know that Jesus could do something about the situation. They believed in him. So maybe from the disciples' perspective, they did the best they could with everything that was happening around them. So I think that we have to be very, very cautious with passing any judgment on these disciples. Because when you and I experience scary and difficult times in our life, we may react just the same. But on the flip side, if we're able to cling to faith and truly let that be the foundation of our lives, maybe we could react differently. Maybe we could do things differently than the disciples. Now, going to a third perspective, that of a neutral observer, again, just someone just reading this passage without putting ourselves in the shoes of Jesus or the disciples, I think we can say objectively that we're glad we weren't in the boat. I think, at least I'll speak for myself, I've thought more than once that I may have been a little bit more adamant with the Lord if I was in the position of the disciples. So, again, we don't judge them harshly, but I do believe that as neutral observers, we could see that Jesus did amazing miracles prior to getting into the boat, and thus he could use his powers and gifts in the boat to help and support them. So in many ways, we can see how the disciples responded, we could see how Jesus responded, and see how they're both correct. Because within God's providential care, again, looking at a situation that was not involved with us, we can see how God can act. We can see how God can truly do his grace no matter what happens. So when we look at things happening in other people's lives, hopefully we can be people of faith that help and support them by reminding them that God will act. Jesus will respond. And all of us, whether we're in the middle of a difficulty or observing it from the outside, we just have to encourage each other to make sure that we follow the Lord and keep the faith. Please know my continued thoughts and prayers for all of you this day. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us.